Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And thanks for joining our CKAN Monthly Live number 9, if I'm not mistaken. I would like to apologize for my Darth Vader voice. It is not from screaming out loud. I'm just slightly ill, but I hope it's not super annoying. And I'll try to keep my speech short and crispy and let our speakers do the talking. So as many of you are aware, today's topic is super hot. We are going to discuss the future of CKAN with co-steward Stephen de Costa, who's here on the call. And before I give Stephen the opportunity to start the presentation, sorry for interrupting, but I'm admitting some guests. There are two ways to ask a question. You can raise your hand or you can drop questions in the chat, whatever you feel good with. Now, if you want to add things to the agenda, I already posted the link to the meeting doc in the chat. I will post it again for the newcomers because I'm aware there is no history. And then you can open the meeting doc and drop your name, affiliation, what brings you to CKAN. Also, if you have some suggestions for topics, that's great. It will be great to have your input so that we can frame future discussions up to your preferences. Just to flag to people that the meeting is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube account. I'll share the link to the YouTube channel in the meeting doc as well. With that being said, I think it's time for me to shut up and let the speaker talk. Now, let's see if you can share your screen. Let me know if Scarlett Johansson, that's good.
So thank you, Joanna or Scarlett. I've also been really sick, so I apologize profusely for this being postponed a week. I was super sick leading up to that last Wednesday, and then I've actually still been sick all up till around yesterday afternoon. So this deck has been rushed together, but that's okay because I think all of us, in one way or another, been thinking about this stuff for years. So it came together pretty quickly. The whole idea is just to run through some thoughts, run through some investments that are being made into the project with the appointment of a chap who will be introduced, Alex, and see how we can get the CKAN 3, something that has been discussed lots of times. And for those who don't want to go through the whole thing, and this is like the YouTubers, this is the TLDR, the too long didn't read, or probably more appropriate, too long didn't watch. So the body of this presentation is really that we want to kick off an engagement to steer the CKAN project towards an awesome 3.0 release. So we want to inspect a wide range of areas surrounding the project, involve as many stakeholders as we can, and document what we learn through this process. We want to propose a vision for CKAN 3.0 in around 8 weeks. So that's not a fully documented backlog and everything ranked and sort of like estimated or anything like that. It's a vision for what we want what we aspire toward. And we hope to bring a lot of people into the next stage, which is all about realizing that vision. So when I say we, I firstly mean Alex, and you'll get to meet him in a few slides from now. I just realized I'm not actually presenting properly, am I? So that's what I should be doing. What am I doing wrong?
It's a slideshow button, I believe.
Yeah, sorry. So maybe I'm still a bit sick. I've only done this 1,000 times. Yeah, so when I say we, I mean Alex, who you just heard from. He snuck in a couple of slides too early. But I also mean the collective we, all of us who are part of the CKAN community. So that's contributors, publishers, users, and vendors alike. Now, moving on, going through the body of this slide deck, it is going to be a bit of a chore to get through all this, but I hope it's going to be valuable to kick off a dialogue at the end. So the mode of engagement I'm hoping for is that you can think of this, or me, as a project sponsor, that this moving to CKAN 3.0 is a mini project within the CKAN project itself. and that Alex will be brought on as the project specialist. He's a project management chap. And I certainly expect that there'll be others helping with coordination. I've obviously been chatting to folks at Daytopian, Rufus himself, tech team members about this, and I think everyone's going to be able to jump in and help coordinate to the best outcomes for this whole process. But as a project, it will be open to adaptation. So as it progresses, we might change the way we approach it. It'll begin with an initial 8-week research phase. Alex is basically 20 hours a week dedicated to this for the next 8 weeks. We'll be aiming to document all the opportunity vectors. And I'll explain what a vector is, but just keep in mind, I like the word, so it's been dropped in there a few times. We want to lean into some of these vectors and test assumptions behind them. We want to be encouraging folks to join in and support the process. And we want to deliver at least a proposed product vision for 3.0 at the end of this 8-week process. And importantly, I really see that this is going to extend into an indefinite sort of process, which is getting onto the next slide, getting into the project, a kind of real dedicated sort of activity around product management. And I've taken a couple of things just from the internet. The first list there on the left is basically taken from a nice article on opensource.com, Rules for Product Managers at Open Source Companies by David Wright. So these are the sorts of questions I think resonate with our project as well. What problem or opportunity is being explored? These are kind of meta questions that we don't necessarily as a group step back and consider for ourselves. And were we to, as individuals, it would be a tough job to sort of like propose that back to the whole group, the whole community. So how is the solution being framed to tackle this? What is being measured to determine if we're being successful? Who are the people in that the solution serves, the users and such? How they're being informed? There's a whole list of good questions there. And I think they're the sorts of things that we want to have a product management activity concern themselves with as basically a support service for all the other folks involved in the community, the vendors, the contributors, the users, publishers, etc. And I've got a note there just that we need to be cautious of survivorship bias, and I think in how that relates to the CKAN project in particular, it's been around for 15 years, and you got to think that for 15 years, folks have been selecting CKAN to do a particular type of job, typically open government data portals. And so the investments have gone back into the project based on that survivorship bias. But what we don't see so much in the project are why it hasn't been selected, why people haven't adopted it. And more importantly, for those users that actually have been using CKAN for their primary data catalog software for some number of years, there might be areas where it could be extended or deepened or enriched, and they're just not considering CKAN as the vehicle to do that. So we want to kind of go beyond just our common sort of experience of what people are coming to us for, and look a bit beyond that. Try and look for where CKAN is potentially failing. So I want to introduce what I'd be calling an interim product owner for the project. The idea is, as I said, an initial 8-week process. The aim is to establish a product management office, because I don't think we need to sort of understand at this early stage exactly what product management needs to manifest as in the project. But I think the term office is generic enough. It's not sort of specific to say it's a particular person with a particular role and accountabilities and responsibilities and authorities. Now, in that office, we would want to detail all the areas within the product that can benefit from product development, detail all the vectors, as I've used before, through which we can expand, deepen, and enrich the project. We want to test and lean into some of those vectors. So really kind of like think about what are the easy doors to knock on and the easy doors to push forward and walk through. And as I, again, mentioned, we want to propose a CKAN 3.0 product vision. And Alex, over to you. Say hello.
Hey, thanks for handing the word to me. Alex, I'm here to help with focusing the product efforts, as Steven mentioned. Over my career, I worked with different market verticals, cryptocurrencies, SAS, online gambling, fintech, community platforms. I have non-commercial coding experience in Java and Python. Excited by the chance to be part of the journey with such an impactful product as CKAN already is. It's a living thing, widely used. I mean, it's wow. Product manager can't make everyone happy, but he can be a point of contact, one that takes care of different user needs. And I'm happy to contribute. Thank you.
Cool. So I'm sure everyone will be hearing more from Alex as we kick things off, but for the meantime, I think we can kick off a little bit of dialogue at the end of this by first having me provide a quite biased monologue on a few things. So this could be not contrarian, but things that people want to react to or might have strong opinions for or against, or just think there's a whole lot that's missing in what I'm going to go through. But having said that, let's go. This is essentially what we've got on some of the slide decks where we talk about what CKAN is. It's a mature, extensively adopted technology. It's a gold standard for open source data management software. It's usable out of the box as a powerful framework, and it can be used to create more customized systems. It's a data management system, and it's a full platform for cataloging, storing, and accessing data sets. Rich front end, great API. And if that was to be summed up from a user's value point of view, it makes it easy to publish, share, and work with data. Now, we might want to test that and say, is that really what CKAN's good for and really great at? What I've started to think about is sort of vectors. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but they might be categorized into different types or areas of concern within the project or interest within the project. The first one here is just to talk about customer types. Now, again, on the website, we talk about CKAN for government jurisdictions and CKAN for enterprise. I've expanded that out a little bit because in my view, these are the sort of 4 areas that have enough of a sort of cohort of interests that they're worth discussing individually. And the top left one there is really, that's where CKAN grew out of, open government data platforms for government jurisdictions. Corporate entities have been picking it up, largely because they want to share corporate data assets as sort of like internal data catalogs and then sharing it within a domain of interest. NGOs have certainly picked up on CKAN as a free and open source tool to publish operational data for broad user communities. And scientific research, again, CKAN is used by organizations conducting scientific research, and essentially it kind of has a good fit in enabling public data repositories. There's a slippery slope though, where within research, working data is actually a pretty important aspect to data itself as well. And I wouldn't say that CKAN has a massive amount of capability to support all the various ways in which research communities work with data. It's really valuable at the publishing stage. Now, if you think about what motivates those types of customers, top left there is really open data and all that represents, whether you talk about transparency or the economic benefits or the proposed economic benefits of non-rivalrous information goods being shared and reused from the public, created from the public purse, but then available as a common good. For corporate entities, it's really around return on investment. There needs to be a business case for why a data catalog is going to be good, why CKAN would be good, and how that's going to improve the data sort of offensive characteristics in competitive landscapes for an organization, or the defensive characteristics of data, again, for protecting their competitive advantages and such. For NGOs, I think it really comes down to the mission fit. How will a data catalog and CKAN itself support the mission objectives of that NGO? And for scientific research, open access has been a wind in the sail for a long time, but there's also the FAIR data principles, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, as I remember. And in each of those areas, those different customer types are looking for supportability as well. And there's sort of variances to the supportability requirements that they have. So that's one set of vectors is what I'm proposing that we should be looking at and sort of really thinking hard on. Another one, which I've often talked about in the past, is that the primary, secondary, and user types of CKAN. I've always talked about the primary user being machines and other applications due to the machine readable catalog itself and the openness characteristics of the data sets and the data resources. Secondarily then is the data custodians, because they're the ones who need to go through the hoops to get the data published and out into the public domain. And then the tertiary user group has always, in my mind, been end users. And that, I think, is an area that really deserves its own sort of breakout. So one of the things I wanted to sort of mention here is that, like a fresh install of CKAN populated with datasets is typically catering to a more privileged data literate set of users. So there's kind of a literacy privilege baked into CKAN itself. Having said that, it's often customized or populated via metadata descriptions and supporting resources to make that data more accessible. So it might be more accessible to less data literate users or intermediaries. If you're thinking of like researchers, civic hackers, data journalists, people who might take the data assets from a catalog, create other works, and those works themselves make the data more, or the insights from that data more accessible to less literate users. And increasingly, I've seen more examples of very specific end users being targeted by data catalogs. So you might be thinking there in climate data portals or resource sector portals where there is an openness characteristic, but they're really wanting to make it open to a particular set of very specialized users. So there's an article on Medium from a couple of years ago by the author I've got there, Sarah Nell Rodriguez, The Data Literacy Privilege. Encourage people to have a quick read of that. It's kind of interesting. I liked that she brought in Bloom's taxonomy, the framework for categorizing educational goals, and so it talked about that in relation to data literacy. I think that could be a good way for us, or a lens for us, to look through this and think about kind of at the bottom of that pyramid is the lower skilled or the lower literate type users, where we might only be able to expect them to come in and recall facts and basic concepts from what they experience or take from a data catalog, but we might need to do extra work to skill those folks up or bring the barriers down for them to go up that pyramid all the way up to kind of the most sort of high skilled set of creating or producing new and original work. So that's another sort of set of vectors, if you will. Another one is solution types. So data portals, data catalogs, and data repositories. I've kind of broken down the ways in which I see CKAN viewed by organizations into these sorts of three areas. It can certainly be used or considered as the same thing, that a data portal is a data catalog, it is a data repository, and it certainly is. But in terms of the value that the organization is seeking, the drivers there around the data portal is really access and discovery. Data catalog is really managing and publishing the data itself. And for a data repository, CKAN does hold its own, but I wouldn't say that it's like at the top end of the scale when it comes to intelligent storage solutions that you might see with data warehousing solutions and data lakes and such, and other integrated data platforms. So I think, again, these are some of the lenses or vectors we can look at when considering how CKAN could be improved or enriched or expanded. And features. This is probably something that should get like hours and hours of consideration baked into it. I think 15 to 45 minutes with each of the tech team members would reveal stacks and stacks of feature types or feature areas that we can consider as their own vectors. The ones that we talk about on the website in terms of API federation, the extensibility, the data store, that's themable, managing metadata, managing permissions, managing versioning, managing data itself, and visualization options. So these are the types of features or clusters of feature types that I think we should be able to coalesce into discrete areas and then call that a vector and say, how can we focus on that, make that particular feature area or vector more successful, more valuable to particular customer types. I should mention all these things interdependent. So what does themable mean for a government organization versus an NGO versus a corporate? What are the value characteristics for each of those? And needs to be said, deployment types, local deployment, on-premise deployment, cloud, all the clouds, hybrid. This is a really important one because one of the biggest barriers to CKAN for those who might need to get a tick from their infrastructure provider is that infrastructure provider going online, finding clear evidence that CKAN can be deployed on their infrastructure of choice, reference architecture, blueprints, all these sorts of things, support capabilities with commercial vendors or community support. All these things are important for us to sort of think about as well. And coming to the last of these examples, value types. So if you think about scaled agile approaches to product development, you often start with business drivers or business value drivers in an organization, and then from there you might move into epics. And this is sort of the lens through which I think about this stuff. For a data catalog, in the core data catalog capability, the way it operates, whether that's around the access and discovery, the publishing and management, or the storage of data, that's the core sort of operational value that is generated by a catalog. But there's certainly like really rich sources of value to be created in the inbound logistics, whether that's through effective onboarding, so reducing the lag or the hassles with onboarding data and data sets into a catalog, or during that process also the enrichment of metadata or the data itself, harvesting capabilities, ELT and ETL type capabilities, and the whole string of things there. Similarly, the outbound logistics. So effective data enablement for end users is different for different types of audience as well. So some might just be looking for data viz capabilities at the data resource level. Some might be looking for business intelligence integration capabilities where you can link off and build insights on top of the data set that you've just discovered. People might be looking from a journalistic point of view and trying to tell stories with data or different data from the catalog itself. Similarly, dashboards might be a coalescence of different data artifacts being brought together with visualizations. So those outbound logistics, inbound logistics and operations, I think are another way in which we can kind of think about the project and think about the value proposition for customers, and the challenges for contributors, and the commercial opportunities for vendors, the natural biases that vendors have to invest in different areas like this. And just to have a recap, so why all these vectors, and how could we potentially use this kind of analysis or this kind of go forward with this kind of a hypothesis that this might help us get to a product vision. So my thinking is, by doing this and looking at the project in all these different ways, we would get some idea of the current landscape surrounding the project. And we might be able to even map this in something like a radar chart. That would be pretty cool. So I've got a summary of that. It's a very simplified example only. The numbers don't mean anything, but it's a summary of those different customer types. I was just types of areas in the project I was just talking through, the value types, customer types, user types, solution types, etc. But then we could then really look at and have a conversation, full conversation through the community about which of those areas would be most beneficial to move the project forward, and which of those areas, were we to move them forward, would be supportable and maintainable by the current stakeholders involved in the project, and what would be the blockers to get more support or more resources into the project, what would be the opportunities. So I think this would really inform our proposed product vision for CKAN 3.0. And yeah, just to reiterate that point, so I think it's a key rule that everything needs to be manageable. In open source projects, it's very easy to say we should do this, that, or the other, but anything that we tackle for 3.0 would need to pass these 4 tests. Is it going to be supportable long term? Is it going to be contributable? Can we have people onboarding and helping to get these things done? Is it going to be sustainable in the long term? That's not just an aspect of supportability. It's going to be, is there going to be a long-term market need for these features such that we can invest in, and it's not going to become invest in that aspect of the roadmap. It's not going to become technical debt or feature debt. And I think the most important test is it going to be lovable and adoptable? Is it going to be something that really impassions us and gets us excited about what CKAN is going to be able to do in the future, or do for in terms of improvements for existing customers and such. And with that, I hope I didn't run through that too quickly. Back to Alex, because
Yep.
we want to move ahead with some next steps, and then we can move into a dialogue about it.
Yeah, so speaking about plans, I really want to hear different perspectives. Sure that they will be diverse, and it will be a good basis for understanding user needs in their variety and complexity. Product strategy would be the output, and in this regard, I would like to cite a classic work and strategy by Michael Porter. So he says that key principles of strategic positioning are strategy is the creation of unique and valuable position. It requires make trade-offs to choose what not to do. It involves creating a fit among companies' activities. So it's a serious thing. I don't want to rush it. Before enough information is gathered and well understood, the quality of information and diversity of perspectives is the focus. Please contribute your feedback and ideas. They will be heard. Also, we would like to introduce an office hours when you can jump in directly into conversation with me and Steve. Thank you.
Cool. So I've jumped out of sharing, and so that slide deck, I'll drop the link into the chat now if folks want to grab it. I'll put it into the meeting notes. It will be open for comments. Let me open the chat. But you know, I'm keen to get feedback from folks. Does it sound like a crazy idea? I don't know. I've been thinking about it for 3 years, I think. So I'm very excited that we're kicking this off. I just want to make sure that we get the opportunity for everyone to get their input into the process.
Okay, so we are opening the floor officially for a Q&A session. So if somebody wants to share their opinion, please raise your hand or ask a question or provide feedback or anything.
Hey guys, hey Steve, this is long overdue and much welcome. So yeah, you know, the great thing about open source is people scratch itches independently, but we need to orchestrate those itches being scratched so we can pull resources, pull use cases, and pull all the innovations the community is marshaling together. You know, one time when I was at the steering group, you know, I took on the task of curating the extensions catalog. And there are hundreds and hundreds of extensions. And it's sad to say most of them basically are bespoke, you know, rose out of people scratching their own itches. But, you know, there was the lack of curation to really, beyond cataloging it, you know, putting it in the extension catalog is, you know, really making is this certified with this work with this version. Maybe in that future that you envision, we'll have something like an ecosystem like WordPress, right? Like where there's a very rich ecosystem of contributors and vendors independently creating these plugins, and people can easily install and uninstall them. Hopefully, you know, we'll reach that sooner than later. Right? But this is a great program. Look forward to interacting with you, Stephen and Alex and the rest of the group. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember like a lot of people have kind of pushed on the CKAN 3.0 in the past. So Daytopian did some really good work talking about different approaches, microservices or decoupled front ends and such. You know, the case for and against different things. I remember, Joel, you were in Buenos Aires, you presented a 3.0 slide deck presentation in 2018 as well. So I think that the difference here is it needs to be a long and sustained process. It needs to be the integration of product management activities into the core sort of activities that are supporting the community itself, so that we don't rely on, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people to put in a massive effort once or twice a year, or once every 2 or 3 years. It's just ongoing, and that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to move towards. And regarding the extensions, absolutely. I consider like there's the core of CKAN, but then there's this satellite of extensions, and just coordinating the satellite of extensions and trying to classify them into good, effective distributions for CKAN. I think that's an easy win. There's some gap analysis that can be performed against, for example, those customer types. What would be the common set of extensions that you would want to propose to a scientific research organization that wants to be working with data as well as having a repository of that work data once published? And honing in on those, there are active issues that might have not had anything touched on them in GitHub, talking about particular, you know, things that the research community would like included, like not just DOI minting or DOI sort of functionalities, but identifiers for individuals, researchers and such. I think we can bundle all those together and then kind of think about that from a grouping point of view around extensions. Augusto.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Hey everyone, hi Stephen. Nice
Hey.
to see you again. Thank you, Stephen and Alex, for the awesome presentation and for bringing this discussion with the community as for the next features and ideas for the future of CKAN. In the last 13 years, I think I've been involved with the CKAN community, and I have talked to a lot of people from data publishers to also data users, and from talking to so many people over the years, I have noticed some of the pain points, or rather difficulties that, or things that they would like to see improved. And just a quick brainstorming here. I have listed 4 points here. Some of those are already in the presentation, like the versioning system. I think it should probably be easier to keep track of different versions. Current CKAN, you do have a metadata for version, but it's not so easy to upload different versions and for users to navigate between these versions. Also, CKAN has basically two ways of storing data, either in the CKAN file store internally in CKAN, or you can point to an external resource. And some people have a special storage where they store the files, like S3 or on the cloud or their own, and they want to store externally. And I have seen very often the case that data publishers update the data on these external storage, and the metadata in CKAN does not reflect the data, the date of in which the data has been updated. So it looks like as if the data is outdated, but it's rather not. So it creates a lot of confusion in users, and data publishers need to set a special process to just to update the metadata. Seems something so simple, but so many people usually complain about that. And also in the community and of data users, sometimes data that was once available, it's no longer available. It's taken offline, and they want to have a way of proving that that particular version of data was there before it was taken offline. So they often ask for creating hashes and digital signatures, so that they can prove that they did create an analysis based on a data that was available and it's no longer there. Also, some common use cases for data to have time series. I myself work on data sets that have that each month or each day get new data added to it or new resources, and we usually either we update the same resource or we could create a new resource, but then you get a really long list of resources in CKAN, so it's not really easy to navigate. So thinking some data structures and UI for this data that are regularly updated daily, once a month, once an hour, or something like that, and to have an easy way to navigate this, not only in the UI but also in the structure of the API. Yeah, sorry if I'm taking too long just explaining this quick brainstorm I try to make here. And thank you again for calling this discussion for the future of CKAN.
No, they're awesome examples, and one thing to remember is, like, I think there are companies like Link Digital and Datopia and others, Deralinks and others, where you know, they're commissioned to do work for people who are investing in CKAN, investing in particular use cases, and that creates a bias in the project where everything becomes bespoke and everyone's approach becomes sort of like part of our service. Without doing these sorts of coordinating activities, there won't be an agreed universal best practice approach for you know, managing stored data that's changed off the server or off CKAN. Well, how would we do that? Some of those things might not actually be technical solutions in CKAN itself. It just might be a playbook. It might be a blueprint for how we would always consult people handle that, for example. And I think that these are the sort of the ideas that are open to us to discover and then put something in place to service those ideas.
All right, do we have other questions? If not, I guess we can wrap it up.
Okay. Well, I'll just a couple of final notes. So as I mentioned, there is the slide deck. We'll almost certainly put out more like a blog post. Alex and I haven't synced too much on the process for moving forward with this, but we are going to kick off these office hours. 2 days, was it Tuesday and Wednesday?
Yeah, exactly.
Tuesday and Wednesday, so 6 a.m. GMT, which might not be perfect timing for everyone, but it's not too bad for me in Australia, so that's okay. But for Alex, that's 8 a.m. And for those who, you know, CKAN is not their day job, it's not so bad to, you know, get up early in the morning European time and jump into something and contribute. You know, over this coming week, I'm sure we'll put something out in the public domain regarding how people can get more involved. I'm super interested in like putting out lots of surveys, trying to create cohorts of individuals and organizations. So we've already got working groups in Canada. Here in Australia, we've got, you know, really re-engaged public sector around open data. And a lot of our customers and folks that aren't our customers but are in public sector are interested in coordinating their views and inputting into something like this as well. So I think we can get government jurisdictions together, try and synthesize all of their thoughts. We should be able to get the vendors together to talk about, you know, what their interests are and what they want to see in the project. There should be lots of opportunity for people to bring ideas to the table. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to it.
Great. Alexei is just saying that we need to think about improving the UI and UX in general, because it's slightly outdated, and I think we all agree here.
Yep. And yeah, there's probably a ton of people who don't select CKAN because out of the box, it can look a bit ugly. And I'm being pretty nice. So, but you know, that also speaks to the bias that is inherent in vendors like digital, because that's where we make service revenues. So we don't have a natural incentive to try and do a, you know, awesome front end for CKAN that can be universally adopted by all. But we should come together as a cohort, as a group of vendors, and say, let's all put something together, 3 or 4 versions of that. And we absolutely can do things like distributions, I think, that would target government jurisdictions for open government data portals, corporates for internal data sharing, NGOs for mission-orientated objectives, and scientific research communities, for example.